Ethan's Saturday started like any other, lazy and unremarkable. He was clearing out the attic, helping his mom prepare for a garage sale. Among the cobweb boxes and dusty furniture, something odd caught his eye. A small, old cell phone lying on a broken desk. It didn't belong to his family. His mom swore it wasn't hers, and Ethan's dad had no idea where it came from. Curiosity got the better of him. Picking it up, he noticed how unnervingly cold it felt in his hand, even though the attic was stuffy and hot. The phone was an early flip model, the kind you might expect to see in a museum, with a cracked screen and buttons so worn the numbers were barely legible. The battery was surprisingly intact. Ethan pressed the power button, and to his shock, it turned on. The phone's interface was bare. No apps, no photos, no music, just a single saved contact titled 1. There was no name, no picture, and no history of calls or messages. Yet, the sight of that single digit sent a shiver down Ethan's spine. A notification buzzed. Startled, Ethan almost dropped the phone. A text had appeared, sent from 1. The message read, "Don't go down the stairs." He laughed nervously. It had to be a prank, some kind of ancient spam message, right? But the phone wasn't connected to Wi-Fi, nor did it have any service. Curious and skeptical, Ethan dismissed the warning and started heading back downstairs to show his mom. As his foot touched the first step, a deafening crack echoed through the house. The staircase collapsed beneath him, sending him sprawling onto the splintered wood below. Pain shot through his leg as he realized he'd narrowly avoided falling through to the basement. Shaken, Ethan limped back upstairs to grab the phone. The screen blinked to life with another message. "I told you." For the first time, Ethan noticed the battery percentage. It was 66%. He could have sworn it had been fully charged a moment ago. He threw the phone into his backpack, determined to figure out who, or what, was behind the creepy texts. As he sat in his room later that night, a new message arrived. "Midnight. Don't look outside." Ethan's stomach dropped. Midnight was just minutes away. Ethan sat frozen in his room, the glow of the phone's screen casting eerie shadows across the walls. The message felt more like a demand than a warning. "Midnight. Don't look outside." His mind raced. It had to be a joke, a sick prank orchestrated by someone who knew just enough to mess with him. But how could anyone know about the staircase incident? And how was the phone even working without service? The clock on his desk ticked closer to 12. His heart pounded louder with each passing second. He tried distracting himself by scrolling through social media on his own phone, but the messages blurred together, his focus consumed by the sinister device on his desk. The air grew colder as the clock struck midnight. "Buzz!" Another message appeared. "You're being watched." Ethan's breath caught in his throat. The room felt oppressive, as if unseen eyes were boring into him. Against his better judgment, he glanced toward his window. The blinds were down, but a faint shadow moved across them, followed by the sound of faint footsteps outside. "Don't look," he told himself, gripping the phone tightly. But his curiosity was stronger than his fear. Slowly, he rose and pulled the blinds aside. The street outside was eerily quiet, illuminated only by a flickering street lamp. At first, he saw nothing unusual. Then, his eyes caught movement. A figure stood beneath the streetlight. It was tall and unnaturally thin, its limbs elongated like some grotesque marionette. The figure's head jerked unnaturally, as if it was searching for something, or someone. Then it stopped moving entirely. Its head turned upward, and though Ethan couldn't see its face, he knew with horrifying certainty that it was staring directly at him. He stumbled backward, letting the blinds snap shut. His phone buzzed again. Too late. A loud knock reverberated through the house, making Ethan jump. He bolted his door and pressed his back against it, his mind spiraling. The knocking grew louder and more frantic, echoing through the otherwise silent house. Ethan grabbed his own phone to call his mom, but before he could dial, the mysterious phone buzzed again. "She can't help you now." The knocking stopped. Everything fell silent. Ethan barely breathed as he strained to hear any sound. Then, slowly, a faint tapping began on his bedroom window. He turned toward it, his heart threatening to burst from his chest. There was nothing there. Not until the blinds began to rise, on their own, exposing the window. Something scratched against the glass. It wasn't a figure this time. It was a word, etched into the frost forming on the outside of the pane. Me? Ethan screamed and flung the phone across the room. It hit the wall with a hollow thud and clattered to the floor. The screen didn't even crack, but a final message flashed up in bold text. Run! The lights in his room went out. Ethan's scream died in his throat as darkness engulfed his room. He stumbled toward the nightstand, fumbling for the flashlight app on his regular phone. His hands trembled so badly he nearly dropped it. The beam of light cut through the blackness, illuminating his room. But something fell off. The shadows stretched unnaturally long, seeming to move on their own. He backed away from the window, his heart pounding, when the old phone buzzed again, faintly glowing from where it lay on the floor. Terrified but compelled, he picked it up. A new message awaited him. You can't hide. Leave now. The tapping on the window resumed, louder, more insistent. Ethan's entire body screamed to flee. Grabbing his backpack and the old phone, he bolted for the door. The hallway outside his room was pitch black. The house was unnervingly silent. No hum of the refrigerator, no ticking clock, just an oppressive void. He crept down the stairs, wincing at every creak of the old wood. As he reached the bottom, his phone buzzed again. It's already inside. A crash sounded behind him, and Ethan whirled around. His flashlight revealed the source, a shattered picture frame on the floor. But as he stared, the shadows on the wall seemed to ripple, and a faint outline began to emerge. Something was there, its form impossibly tall, its limbs contorted in unnatural angles. It moved toward him. Ethan bolted for the front door, yanking it open and stumbling out into the night. He didn't care where he was going. He just needed to run. The old phone buzzed again as he sprinted down the street, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Turn left. Now! Instinctively, he obeyed, veering onto a narrow alleyway. The sound of footsteps behind him sent a fresh wave of panic through his veins. He didn't dare look back. The footsteps weren't human. They were too fast, too erratic, like something scrambling on all fours. The alley ended abruptly in a high chain-link fence. Ethan's stomach sank. He was trapped. The phone buzzed. Climb. His hands closed around the cold metal of the fence as the sound of scraping claws grew closer. He climbed as fast as he could, his fingers slipping on the dew-coated links. As he reached the top, a hand, or something that resembled a hand, shot out from the darkness below, its elongated fingers nearly grazing his ankle. He leapt to the other side, landing hard on the pavement. Pain shot through his knees, but he didn't stop. He kept running, his lungs burning, until he reached the safety of a nearby park. Collapsing onto a bench, Ethan tried to catch his breath. For a brief moment, everything was quiet. The old phone buzzed once more. It's not over. The street lamp above him flickered and went out. The darkness pressed in around Ethan as the street lamp extinguished, leaving him in a sea of shadow. His hands tightened around the old phone, now his only source of light. Its faint glow painted his face in sickly blue tones as another message appeared. Run to the woods. Ethan looked toward the park's tree line. The woods were pitch black, their branches clawing at the night sky like skeletal hands. His instinct screamed to stay put, but the sound of scraping claws returned, closer now, echoing down the street. He bolted. The world blurred as Ethan sprinted into the woods, weaving between trees and dodging low-hanging branches. His flashlight flickered, casting erratic beams of light that made every shadow seem alive. He didn't know where he was going, only that he couldn't stop. Behind him, the sound of pursuit grew louder. It wasn't just one set of claws anymore. It was many. They clattered and scratched, accompanied by a guttural growling that chilled Ethan to his core. The phone buzzed again. Take the path on your right. He veered sharply, nearly tripping over a gnarled root. The new path was narrower, winding deeper into the woods. The growling receded slightly, but he didn't dare slow down. His lungs burned, his legs ached, but sheer terror propelled him forward. Then the trees parted abruptly, revealing a clearing. In the center stood an old, decrepit shack. Its windows were shattered, its wooden frame leaning as if it might collapse at any moment. Ethan hesitated, his instincts screaming that this was a trap. The phone buzzed once more. Inside. Now! A shrill, inhuman screech erupted from the woods behind him. The sound was unlike anything Ethan had ever heard, a mix of rage and hunger that shook him to his core. Without thinking, he sprinted for the shack. The door creaked loudly as he pushed it open, the smell of damp wood and decay assaulting his senses. He slammed the door shut and shoved an old chair under the handle, his hands trembling as he secured the makeshift barricade. The interior was bare, save for a rotting table and a single, dusty mirror hanging on the far wall. The silence was oppressive, broken only by Ethan's ragged breathing. He backed away from the door, his eyes scanning the shadows for movement. The phone buzzed. "Don't look in the mirror." Ethan froze. His gaze darted to the cracked mirror hanging crookedly on the wall. He hadn't even noticed it before. The glass was clouded with grime, but something faintly moved within its surface. A whisper filled the room, so soft he thought he might have imagined it. But it grew louder, more insistent, a chorus of overlapping voices hissing his name. "Ethan! Ethan! Ethan!" He pressed his hands over his ears, backing farther away from the mirror. But as he moved, the voices grew louder, and the reflection in the glass grew sharper. It wasn't his own image staring back. It was something else. A face emerged from the darkness of the mirror, pale and featureless, its mouth stretching into an impossibly wide grin. Its eyes, black, bottomless pits, locked onto Ethan. The door rattled violently, snapping him out of his trance. Whatever was outside wanted in. The phone buzzed again. "Break the mirror." Without thinking, Ethan grabbed the rotting chair and hurled it at the mirror. The glass shattered, fragments scattering across the floor. The voices ceased instantly, replaced by a deafening silence. But then, the phone buzzed one final time. "You've let it out." From the broken shards of the mirror, something began to rise. A figure emerged from the shards, ethereal yet horrifyingly solid, as though it was woven from the darkness itself. Its elongated limbs and jagged edges seemed to shift and crackle, defying the natural order of the world. The air grew heavy, pressing against Ethan's chest, making it hard to breathe. The phone buzzed in his trembling hand. "Run. There's no escape now." Ethan turned toward the door, but it burst open, flinging the makeshift barricade across the room. The clawed shadows from the woods flooded inside, pooling at the feet of the being from the mirror, as if feeding its strength. "Why me?" Ethan whispered, tears streaming down his face as he backed into a corner. The being tilted its head, the grin growing wider. Then, for the first time, it spoke, its voice a guttural symphony of countless others, chilling and deafening. "Because you answered." Ethan clutched the phone, his last tether to sanity, and it buzzed one last time. The screen showed only a single word. "Me." The being lunged. Darkness consumed him,